So this video looks at the use of animals within psychological research. So there are lots of reasons why animals may be used within the learning approach to be studied across psychology, all of them ranging on the board at the moment, so they're easy to handle. They allow us to test new situations that may not be ethical to put humans in. The strict controls, because they're all tested within laboratory settings, allowed for the studies to be reliable and allow us to have objectivity. And actually, thanks to Darwin, it suggests that we can use animals and find out the findings from animals and then apply these to humans. However, there are lots of problems in using animals and then trying to generalize the results to humans because of differences within brains and also differences within cognition of animals and humans. It's very difficult to apply the findings to humans. It's not certain that animal learning is the same as human learning, so when you're testing how animals learn things, you can't necessarily assume that humans learn them in the same way. There are obviously other factors involved rather than just stimulus response situations that may be set up by the experimenter, so such as press the lever for food. There might be other things involved there. Animals don't have the same emotional responses to humans, and they're very different from each other, let alone being different from humans. There are ethical guidelines for the treatment of animals. So the law governing the use of animals in scientific research is an act which was released in 1986, and it suggests that any research involving animals has to have a license from the Home Office. The premises must also be licensed for animal research, and the laboratory animals must be procured from high quality suppliers who comply with Home Office standards. The guidelines for working with animals in 2012 suggest that researchers must not break the law. They must not use endangered and protected species, which restricts research involving apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, etc. Where possible, live animals should be replaced with research alternatives, so we should be using videos, computer simulations where we could. Animals should only really be used as a last resort. We should be careful in our choice of species, so we should really use animals that have been bred in captivity in the first place because it means that it's less of a shock for them. We should reduce the number of animals where we can and use good statistics to get the maximum amount of data, which means that the research is really thought through, it's well carried out so that the use of animals isn't being wasted. And where the animals are being studied, they must be housed, fed and watered in a suitable way, along with being given companions in order to give them the best quality of life. It also suggests that if the research is over, animals should be disposed of in the humanest of ways. So that may mean that we have to have research facilities with facilities to do that on site. Animals must be treated humanely during research at all times, and the three areas touched upon there are caging, so distress should be minimised, they should be allowed to be sociable. If it's a social species, then they should be housed with other animals. They shouldn't be deprived food. It is allowable to do this in certain situations if the animal is healthy to begin with, but they shouldn't be deprived of food because it leads to distress. And if any sort of pain is going to be involved, then anaesthetic should be given to the animals in order to be able to minimise this pain. If it gets to the point where the animals need to be killed, then all of this should be humane and the body should be disposed of in a humane way, as we've just discussed. All animal research should be conducted on a cost-benefit analysis, which you can see at the bottom, where research should only be taking place if the risk to the animals is low and the benefit to society is high. It's argued that in a situation where the risk is high but the benefit is high as well, then some research may get through ethical committees in those situations. So if you think you have a cure of cancer, for example, but you need 3,000 rats to test it on, it's a possible situation that might get through as long as you can justify the need for the 3,000 rats in the first place. Now, the three R's, sum up the ethical principles of using animals in research, as we've just discussed, but replace, reduce, and refine the way that the research is carried out. Bateson's cube isn't necessarily stated on the new spec anymore, but it's interesting to remember this. So it's a convenient way of weighing up the ethical decisions about the animals, and it looks at the three sides of the cube, so how harsh the suffering of the animals will be, the benefits of the findings to society, and then the quality of research. No research that isn't of a high quality is allowed to take place on animals. and here's Bateson's cube. So notice the word minimise that I keep using throughout this discussion, because the BPS ethical guidelines don't take an absolute position on animal experiments, but research that inflicts suffering on animals should only be minimised, but it may sometimes be justified if there's a clear benefit to society and the research is of the highest standard. It's worth remembering that animals themselves may benefit from this research as long as it improves their diet, conservation, veterinary treatment, etc. You must separate here ethical issues from practical issues. So practical issues themselves look at how the research is going to be conducted. So they might suggest that animals reduce the cost of research because they don't have to be paid. However, the cost of buying lab equipment and buying the relevant licenses for the premises and from the Home Office actually can increase the cost. There is a cost of feeding the animals, making sure that they're appropriately housed and at the right temperature. There's also danger. Animals can scratch and bite. Even lab-raised animals may carry diseases, so there's therefore a danger to the human researchers. And connected to this is the need to keep the research area clean, the animals free from stress, to make sure that they're not particularly aggressive. You've also got to make sure that you've got enough space. Now, the good thing with using animals is sometimes they might be small, so they may take up less space. But if they're going to be given the space that they need that requires their species, then this actually can take a lot of space if they need certain room to make them feel like they're secure. Supervision, don't forget that using animals in research, they have to be supervised all the time. So humans can't just finish work at 5 o'clock and go home or take the weekends off, because somebody has to be there to care for the animals, make sure they've got water, make sure that they've got food, and give them social interaction and social time all the time. It's so important that you're reading exam questions carefully and reviewing previous exam questions that gone. The exam board will be very specific to you in that question whether they want you to talk about animal ethics or practical issues in using animals, and you must make sure that you're separating those. If you're talking about issues with the animals being distressed in a question that asks you about practical issues, then you're not going to get any marks at all. So you must make sure that you're really clear on the distinction of ethical issues and practical issues of using animals in research.